Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's window company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, the Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. So we're here in the spring of 2010. People think that the world is getting better. My friend Dr. Sam Chandon, prominent economist for Real Capital Analytics, says we're out of the recession, world is getting better. Bruce Mosler, speaking at my panel, said the world is getting better, we've reached the bottom. Is the world getting better? Is my apple polished? Is it better? So today I have four distinguished individuals who are going to give me their insight on the state of the world, the state of the real estate market and the economy. My guests, they include Jeff Levine, real estate partner at the accounting firm of Margolin, Weiner and Evans, LLP. Tom Lydon, president of the City Investment Fund. Peter Duncan, the president and CEO of George Comfort and Sons. And last but not least, my good friend Jim Orphanides, the president of Centurion Holdings. So James, you're sometimes an optimist. Is it getting better? Is my apple polished? It's going to be a good spring of 2010?
Michael, I am always an optimist. I'm sitting on the right side of the turf. It starts there.
I agree. As long as we're on this side of the grass as opposed to the other side of the grass, it's much better.
Okay.
But how do you look at it? Been involved in the real estate and the economy for the last 40 years. How do you look at it? Have we reached the better sign? What do you see?
You want me to give you the demarcation? Are we at the end? Are we in the middle? Are we still?
I want you to just give me your thoughts.
We're not at the end. There's still going to be some more displacement, and things they may still get a little worse before they get better. And the obvious issue would be, where are the jobs going to come from? Let's start with the basics. And the government is involved everywhere. The government is growing faster than any other part of the segment of the entire economy. That's not a good sign. Where are the business leaders? Where's the small businessman that's going to do the hiring? I worry about that before I would worry about some of the other issues. Those other issues that might come up, in particular in our world here in New York in the real estate industry, they'll settle out because there's a lot of smart people. But I would say that the optimism would be that the business people that are all around us, especially in this town, this great city, let them do their job. And let's have a little less interference.
Now here's the interesting, George Comfort and Sons are owners of all types of, in the asset class of office, buildings, retail, and other properties in New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. How do you see it for your portfolio? I mean, you're in New York City, you're in Stanford, you're in Princeton, you're in Philadelphia, and you're in Los Angeles. How do you see the different markets, with regard to, the lack of jobs, the fact that some of these companies aren't hiring, people have retrenched some of their office needs to try to save things. Where do you see it?
Well, it's tough right now. I mean, we're where we have vacancies in our portfolio, we're aggressively trying to fill them. But having said that, I mean, I too am an optimist. You can't be in this business without being an optimist. And we are seeing, we're seeing a fair amount of activity.
Are people? I remember last year, people said, "Yeah, I'll look at space." I mean, there was a lot of space leased in 2009, but some of it was leased at prices which were really very special. Are people still saying, "I want that bargain. I really want that deal"?
Well, I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people out there looking, and rightfully so. They should be. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, people do have to have homes for their operation, and in companies, there are companies that appear that they're going to grow and are thinking that they're going to grow, and so they're looking for new homes and new opportunities. And the one saving grace we do have in this city, quite frankly, is we haven't had a tremendous amount of addition to our commercial stock in the past 20 years, if you really look at it. So we do have vacancy, which we have to grind through, but we're going to grind through it.
Now, but you have properties in Los Angeles. How are they seeing the market?
It's a little bit different out there because our assets are in Beverly Hills, California, and we're tied into the entertainment world quite a bit. But I will tell you, after an incredibly slow second half of 2008 and really very little activity in 2009 and the one asset that had available space, we have seen a huge pickup in activity. And I don't know what that means. I think people are out there hunting for bargains. That is for sure. But I think things are starting to move and the ice is starting to break a little bit.
Speaking of potpourri of products, you own land in Coney Island, apartments in Manhattan and the Bronx, office buildings in Manhattan and in Brooklyn, a variety of other things, all in the 5 boroughs. You have in every one of the boroughs?
Every one of the boroughs.
Every one of the boroughs. So how do you see this world? And you've been around the world a couple of times.
Well, I think this is my 4th real estate recession, but I call this a real estate depression. It's not just a recession because the losses that will be taken to both financial institutions and owners are going to be massive, and the dislocation is far more than just a bump in the economic cycle. And we still have a long way to go on that whole process for the excesses of 3 or 4 or 5 years in order to get back to a basis in real estate so that you can afford to lease office space where there is activity at an economic level. It's still a lot of losses to be taken by both equity holders and lenders, but the key thing is the fundamentals, and I think 2010 will be a little bit better than 2009. You had to look at 2009, we were coming out of a financial worldwide crisis, but especially here in New York and Wall Street and the Lehman bankruptcy and Bear Stearns going away. So in some of our properties, such as a hotel we own in Times Square, the occupancy is 20 points higher than it was first quarter last year. Now the room rates are slightly higher, so still you're not getting the return on the investment, but there's still there is a good active demand for hotel rooms in New York.
But 2007 and 2008, where there was irrational exuberance in the hotel business. The people never thought they'd get these prices. I mean,
not through all 2008. It ended about
Labor Day. Labor Day. Greenspan.
Just
irrational exuberance.
Just when we reopened the Crown Plaza Hotel after spending $75 million on Labor Day, 2008. It all went downhill from there. But in the residential sales market, we're selling condominiums. There are now buyers. If you price your product correctly, there are buyers. Difficult to finance. That wasn't happening a year ago.
I think that's an interesting thing, and I think Jeff has clients like that, and we've seen, because I did a couple of shows with Vinny Rizzo and some other people recently, and the buyers are having difficulties in getting mortgages.
That's a serious problem.
That's a serious problem.
Serious problem, and especially if you're in unusual situations of development deals that aren't 50% sold or 70% sold. Absolutely. It's a dilemma where you have to, close a certain number of units before you can get access to low-cost financing through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and that is causing a dilemma that we're trying to sort through in a couple of our properties. And that means you have to get very creative, and you have to find people who can put down lots of equity. But New York still has a lot of people, even after the financial crisis, who do have net worth. And you have to come back to price the product for value. Then you can move it. I think the condo inventory is being absorbed in Manhattan quite nicely. In Brooklyn, the supply is much greater. A lot of those projects, again, are turning rental or quasi-rental and condo, and it's going to take longer, to do that. But I think, again, 2010 will be a slight improvement, but we still have a long way to go in the fundamentals.
Mr. Levine, you've gone through the 4 cycles in real estate.
Only upsides.
Only upsides. Now, but you have clients. You have one client who's building a lot of condominiums in New York City. You have clients who are in retail. You have clients, George. Peter's thing. How do you look at it? Are your clients bitching? Are they feeling difficult? Are the banks cooperating with them?
My clients are the salt of the earth. They never bitch.
Boy.
We whine.
But let's take Jim's comment because it's interesting. I listen to the talk shows. I listen to the politicians talking, and the government bailed out all the banks. And they start bitching and moaning about bonuses, and they make it on stock, and they're restricted. What everybody fails to mention is that when you load it up with stock and it's not available to spend, there's no money going into the economy. Now, I heard something 2-3 weeks ago where they said, no, they don't get it. They don't pay taxes on it. The corporations pay tax. But that's not the issue. There's no money being spent in the economy. You go and buy a co-op that's on a resale, a condo on a resale. Everybody's doing the kitchens. Everybody's doing bathrooms. And now you have people working. You lease out new space. Everybody has to get the tenant improvement work. Now you have your contractors working. We talk of the hotels. And yes, the average daily rates are down. Everything is going, but I'm hearing optimism. Maybe it's false. Projects going to special servicing, okay, let's push it off. Let's see what happens in 3 years. Do you delay it? Or is that reality? But if we continue to lease space, sell space, you're going to get money into the economy. You mentioned about condominiums and getting marketing, financing available for it. There are 2 groups coming into the U.S., which I'm aware of, that hasn't been signed yet, but is being worked on, to provide financing for those cases. Maybe they'll require 50% down, 25% down. And maybe the construction lender will take the 25% and turn it into a mezz loan. Everybody's looking at opportunities. Maybe the euphoria is false, but hell, it's better than it was a year ago.
About a year ago, I was in Washington at a think tank of about 20 people, and there was a very bright economist from the Heritage Foundation. And he said, you're going to see a recovery, and then you're going to see in 2010 a major problem coming back. And, part of it is, you can print a lot of money, and you can do Obama land and this and that. April 30th is the end of the new tax credit, the new home tax credit. Now, for New York City, for Manhattan, it really didn't have any effect because it was up to $800,000. Now, it did have an effect on some units in Brooklyn, which would be sold, to Connex Development with Apollo.
Jersey City, I think it had
It had some effect, but so that's gone. So, and how many more times they renewed it once? What are we going to do? Another investment tax credit of the '80s? Over there. How are we going to, how are we going to get things going again? You're in, you bought Worldwide Plaza. You couldn't build that building for that price today.
No.
There is no way.
Good point.
People bought 4 New York Plaza for $97 a square foot. I had him on a panel. But there's new buildings going up in lower Manhattan. Brooklyn is having problems on this. How do we see the market? It's hard. You're a well-capitalized company. You have good investors who've been in business. You've been around 70 years, so it's a different case. You have the city funds. You have other people. What happens to the person who's undercapitalized? You know, they go to him and they can get money, but what about your clients who aren't the strong companies, Mr. Levine?
There's plenty of money around. There's money sitting on the sidelines that is looking to come in. Of course, no different than the tenant trying to steal space at $10 a square foot. The investor is also looking for the fabulous return and buying the property at the right price. Things will happen because who's stuck with these properties? If you consider existing properties with debt, where are the banks going with this debt? Are they selling their debt? And that's what I'm seeing happening. We're currently in negotiation with a life insurance company to take a 30% haircut on their debt. It'll happen.
I think, you know, how do you see it? Do you see banks this year taking the hits? Last year, I think in 2009, they weren't taking the hits. They were waiting for more profit, you know, so you can spread it out over a couple years. Do you see that happening?
Well, you know, Tom was articulating it, and right before we came in here, we were just briefly talking about it. We wonder why there has not been some of the balance sheet momentum to just clean up some of the portfolio and move it. I think, quite honestly, even with the TARP and with the government's involvement, and again, I'm going to go back to this point, I think the message has been so lack of clarity that business executives and business people are waiting to have clear rules, clear definition, a clear understanding of where it's going to be and what's going to be the consequences if they make the next 2 or 3 steps. Let them get some real good guidelines. Let the government take the real tough task of making definitive lines and definitive statements, and let the business people go back to their jobs of rebuilding and restarting the economy. The government can't do it, and we have to stop this Wall Street bashing. It's just ridiculous. Wall Street did not cause this recession. That is not what is the cause of this recession. And if we want to look at it, all of us can say we can all blame, but then we can all say we're all part of the solution. Please, this is not the time to think about what's going to be this or that. There are plenty of opportunities. In some parts of the country, if you were trying to say there was the $10 a square foot tenant, you might want that tenant. If it was a Walmart, that might attract 14 other tenants to your site.
Okay.
Think about it. There's quality out there. There's a quality measure in everything. We seem to only want to quantify things, Mike. Let's talk about the quality of things. And that's important. And right now in New York City, we still have a little bit of a quality of life, but there are way too many people that are very nervous and uncertain about what they can expect. And they're holding on because they're waiting for those clear signals. And they are waiting to see that there is a true optimism, not just on a certain group of people, but all of us. So that cautious optimism.
Well, I also think too that there's a little bit of, you know, everybody's trying to move things down the road a little bit before taking care of their problems. And, you know, in some of these situations, you know, there's reserves that are still in place. You know, and people are trying to hopefully see the leasing market turn a little bit. And, you know, and I do think there is, I agree with Jeff, there's a tremendous amount of money sitting on the sidelines, watching and wanting to come in.
Watching and maybe waiting.
Well,
definitely. That's the point.
Well, definitely
are they
waiting.
ready to shell it out, or are they still
Remember,
waiting?
that money, a lot of those people with that money have made some major mistakes themselves.
Oh,
And they don't want to go out with their investors, who are big pension plans, and go buy something and then face another write-down the neck, because they have problems in their existing portfolios they're trying to convince the investors they have under control. So no one wants to be that guy to stick his neck out too much, and once one person does it, all of a sudden other people will do it. And I think one of the other reasons things move slowly, the reason there's a difference, I think, between a recession and a real estate depression, it's when you have a situation when you have borrowers of real estate who generally are weak today for the most part, but the lender to the project may be in worse financial shape than the borrower. So it creates a double-edged situation where no one can make decisions. And you have banks who are under government control, who are really just don't want to face up to making the key decisions to foreclose, extend, and it's just slowing down the whole process. It's similar to the
$1.4
Japanese
trillion
banks.
of debt comes due over the next 3 years. where there's some CMBS. There were 3 CMBS deals done last year. Nothing has been done in the first 2 months of this year. There is some money in some conduit loans. Goldman Sachs is offering conduit loans. J.P. Morgan is offering, and they're trying to put them together. But the underwriting is much harder. The loan to value is different. All the conditions aren't there. How are your clients going to get financing?
Well, if they're buying new properties with difficulty, but with putting in more equity. If they're talking about refinancing the existing mortgage, putting in more capital, or going back to the way it was in the 90s. And you go to your bank and you say, hello, partner.
I'll give a good example. Your partner in one of your buildings, not in your building, happens to be the case. And the case, SITQ, owned 1515 Broadway. They had a $625 million mortgage, and they refinanced it for $475 million. Somebody had to come up with $150 million. So somebody had to step up to the plate because the property, they couldn't get a mortgage for that.
Well, really, the bottom line is you can get financing, and I think there's a lot of the balance sheet lenders are really coming back together, and you're able to, on the larger loans, you're able to put syndicated bank deals together,
which you couldn't last year the end of 2000.
Well, we did, but it wasn't easy. But the bottom line is things have changed. Your 65% LTV or lower. Your coverage requirements are much
11,
tighter.
12%.
Reserve accounts.
There's reserve accounts, and there's all this. And really what's happening is that you're either having to, because of the LTVs, you're either having to do very heavy amortization, because what these guys are now looking for to is how are they going to refinance out their position 5 years from now or 3 years from now or whatever the length of the loan is. And and rightfully so. I just think the things have changed, and the days of 95% or 85% IO only loans they don't exist. And so, there was a feeding frenzy there for a while, and now it's going to take a while to clean up. I think part of the issue that you do have, though, is that with this is that there was a significant amount of CMBS financing done out there. And so you're not you're not picking up the phone and calling your friend at the bank that you can talk to. That you can talk to. I mean, because you're basically you're speaking to groups that are representing a bunch of different bond holders, and these they're representing a whole pool of loans. It's not a single loan, and so all the dynamics have changed when you have to deal with that. So it's not as easy, and I don't think everybody's worked out. You're wondering why things aren't moving. I don't think everybody's kind of worked out how that's gonna, where that's gonna fall out.
It's almost on each deal. You read, each
Right.
deal has where they place this. It's almost as if we put a title impediment on the real estate to make it less valuable because of the financing. It's like, you used to buy assumable financing that made it more valuable. I think some of these structures actually reduce the value of the property because you can't easily get to a restructure because of where they place these notes. And I was just reading something yesterday that I just got a chuckle of, where I know quite a bit about real estate finance and have done it. I couldn't understand at all what had been done. And the people actually who will benefit from that are the investment bankers who got laid off, along with the lawyers who structured that. They'll be buying these pieces up and then reselling them. But I think Peter's comment, all it does is mean, even if the world's getting a little better, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
But it's not that dissimilar to, I remember sitting in 1988 and 89 with Japanese bank syndications, okay, and the banks were broke. We didn't realize that the banks were broke because you weren't familiar with Japan, and they were going, and it would take 16 banks. It would take forever to get through that negotiation. Now it's just something called CMBS, or it's a German bank or an Irish bank or a Royal Bank or something. And the decision makers, you don't know where they are, you don't know where to go, and it'll take slower. And it's very hard, but the losses have to be taken. These aren't going to correct it.
I want to ask a specific question of you, because you own rent-regulated apartments. Have rents dropped in the rent-regulated apartments in the outer boroughs?
No, they have not. Every apartment that we renovate in Brooklyn or Bronx is leased upon completion, and the incremental return on renovating that apartment from the vacancy is 30, 40%. Now, I wish to say our investment return was that we actually paid too much going in for it, but basically we're earning our way out by these turnovers that are mostly they're all natural type of turnovers, but they rent immediately because they're still below what an open market would be, and they're just middle class workforce housing type of things. So from a vacancy standpoint, that's not an issue. It's just that market too, when you were paying 5 times the rent roll, that was the proper price to pay. You shouldn't have paid 8 times the rent roll, at least in Bronx and Brooklyn. So you got to work your way back, but there's still financing. You can sell it. We're selling a couple of properties at 10 times in Brooklyn at 10 times. And there's financing available from the local savings banks.
Local savings banks have more money than
At very reasonable rates.
Are they aggressively lending?
Yeah, they are.
The local savings banks are aggressively lending. They've changed their underwriting a little bit, but there's a new bank, a New Jersey bank called Investor Savings. They opened up a loan production office with 6 individuals. They're offering 5, 7, and 10-year money with a 30-year amortization, and 10-year money they're offering it at $5.99.
That's very fair.
I mean, that's
fair.
a very aggressive rate, and so there is money from multifamily. Now the other big boys in the multifamily are still there, but the 120 debt service coverage is 130 now, and there's nothing for the future that I'm going to get that type of rent. Tell me what the rent is today.
They're not going to buy. They're not going to buy into vacancy. They're not going to give any credit for vacancy. It used to be they'd actually lend you money to renovate to the break-in. So it's
That used to be a big
concern.
benefit.
Yeah.
But remember, real estate did not start this recession, and real estate always has been behind the economy. We're not an industry maker. We're part of the industry and a big part of the economy. But to blame real estate for this recession is a mistake.
So in a quick thing, the end of 2010, we're in much better shape, or
After the elections, I think we'll be in much better shape.
I would agree with that.
Thomas?
Yeah, but also there's lots of positives. Look at super senior CMBS debt. People have doubled their money in 1 year, and the interest been a lot of money made.
Timing is everything.
I think we'll be much better off. However, I think the pain is still going to be awaiting us.
And with that pain awaiting, I'd like to thank my 4 guests, Jeff Levine, Tom Lydon, Peter Duncan, and Jim Orfaniti. See you next week.
Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's Window Company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, the Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.